360 years ago, London was not a city. It was a mass grave. 1 in 4 Londoners dead. Mass graves overflowing. And the worst was still coming. King Charles stood on the riverbank and watched his capital disappear into smoke. But something happened in those ashes. Something no historian has ever fully explained. Stay with us. This story will change everything you thought you knew about London. The year is 1660. London is the beating heart of a rising empire. 500,000 souls. Ships from 30 nations crowded the Thames. Gold, silk, spices, tobacco. London was the world. Merchants grew richer every year. New mansions rose beside ancient churches. London believed itself untouchable. But beneath all that gold, London was rotting. 500,000 people. No clean water. No sewage. Every summer, disease spread through London streets. People prayed it would never be the plague. London had survived the Black Death in 1348. 1 in 3 people across England died that year. For 300 years, London lived in fear of its return. Every summer brought the same dread. Then in spring 1665, a man died overnight in a western parish. His body was unlike anything seen before. Black swellings covered his neck and armpits. His skin had darkened. The parish doctor had no explanation. London had survived everything before. But this time, the enemy was already inside the walls. Summer 1665. The heat came early, and with it, death moved through London like an invisible army. In April, 43 dead. By June, 600. By August, the numbers became too terrible to count. London's church bells rang every hour, not for prayer, but to count the dead as they fell. The rich fled first, packed their carriages with silver and servants, and vanished to the countryside. King Charles II left London in July. He moved his entire court to Oxford and did not return. London fell silent. Shops boarded, markets empty. The greatest trading city on earth became a ghost. A red cross on your door meant one thing. Someone inside was sick. Wardens nailed you in. Entire families, healthy and sick together, locked inside. A death sentence disguised as quarantine. Gravediggers worked through every night. But the pits were never deep enough, never large enough. Samuel Pepys, a government clerk, stayed in London and recorded everything he witnessed in his diary. He wrote, "The streets are empty. Grass grows between the cobblestones. This is not London anymore. Grass grew between the cobblestones of London's greatest streets. The city had become a wilderness." September 1665. 7,000 dead in a single week. London was dying faster than anyone could bury. Plague doctors walked the streets in beaked masks filled with herbs, believing scent could block the disease. By winter, the plague had finally begun to fade. London exhaled, but its nightmare was far from over. Winter brought cold, and cold slowed the plague. By February 1666, London dared to breathe again. Historians estimate 100,000 Londoners died. 1 in 5 of the entire city, gone. King Charles returned to London. He found a city broken, hollow, but somehow still standing. Entire trades had vanished. Streets of craftsmen empty. London's economy lay in ruins alongside its people. But scientists later discovered something remarkable. The Great Fire that followed may have ended the plague. The fire burned the rat-infested timber slums that had spread the plague. Destruction became London's cure. Then on September 2nd, 1666, at 2 in the morning, a baker's oven in Pudding Lane caught fire. A strong east wind was blowing that night. Within an hour, the entire street was burning. The Lord Mayor was woken and told. He looked at the fire and went back to sleep. A woman could put it out. By dawn, the fire had consumed over 300 houses, and it was still spreading, unstoppable. The fire moved faster than any man could run. Buildings that had stood for centuries, gone in minutes. Londoners fled to the Thames, boats filled with terrified families, furniture, animals, anything salvageable. And Samuel Pepys buried his wine and Parmesan cheese in his garden to save them from the approaching flames. Old St. Paul's Cathedral, the greatest church in London, caught fire on the third day. The lead roof melted. Eyewitnesses reported the molten lead flowed down Ludgate Hill like a river. Stone exploded in the heat. King Charles II did not flee this time. He rode into the fire himself, handing out coins to firefighters. The only way to stop a fire this size was to demolish buildings in its path, create gaps the fire could not cross. For 3 days and 3 nights, London burned. 13,000 houses, 87 churches, all gone. 80% of the entire city of London was destroyed. 400 acres of the city simply erased. When the fire finally died, survivors walked through ruins so vast they could not find the streets they had known. Miraculously, the official death toll from the fire was only 6 people. Historians still debate this number. 100,000 Londoners were left homeless overnight. They camped in fields outside the city walls. King Charles rode to the refugee camps and spoke directly to his people. The city would be rebuilt, he promised. London needed someone to blame. A French watchmaker named Robert Hubert confessed falsely and was hanged. Historians later proved Hubert was nowhere near London when the fire started. He was innocent, hanged anyway. The fire had destroyed London, but it had also revealed something extraordinary, a chance to start again. Within days of the fire dying, a 34-year-old architect named Christopher Wren presented his plan. London lay in ashes, but in those ashes, the blueprint for the greatest city on earth was already being drawn. Parliament passed the Rebuilding Act of 1667. London would rise, but this time in stone, not timber. Christopher Wren was given a task that would define his life: rebuild 52 churches across London. The new rules were strict. No more timber in London. Every house rebuilt in brick and stone. Forever. Wren redesigned the streets, wider, straighter, with space between buildings. Fire would never spread like this again. New drainage channels ran beneath every street. Clean water pipes followed. London was being born again. Wren's new churches rose across London, each one different, each one a masterpiece of English Baroque. But Wren's greatest challenge stood at the heart of London, rebuilding the most famous church in England. Wren's design was rejected twice by the church. He secretly modified it as it was being built, and told no one. Construction of the new St. Paul's took 35 years. Wren was 78 when it was finally complete. Today, St. Paul's Cathedral still stands, exactly where it stood before the fire. The rebuilt city of London became something new, the financial capital of the world. Banks replaced churches. The Bank of England was founded in 1694, just 28 years after the fire. London was already dominating the world. In 1677, the monument was built where the fire began. Its height equals its exact distance from Pudding Lane. Within 50 years, London had been completely rebuilt. Larger, cleaner, stronger than anything that came before. The rebuilt London became the nerve center of the British Empire, the largest empire in human history. At its peak, the British Empire covered 1/4 of all land on Earth. It began here, in these rebuilt streets. London had survived plague, survived fire, and built an empire. But its story was far from finished. The Great Plague and Great Fire of 1665 and 1666 were not London's destruction. They were its transformation. The plague forced London to create the world's first organized public health system. Disease changed medicine forever. The fire created the world's first modern building codes. Every city on Earth today follows rules born in London's ash. The fire also gave the world something else. The very concept of fire insurance. Born in London's coffeehouses. Walk London's streets today, and you are walking on Christopher Wren's vision. The fire planned every step. But behind every statistic, there were real people, real families, real lives torn apart and somehow rebuilt. Samuel Pepys survived both disasters. He lived to see London rebuilt, and his diary survived to tell us everything. Historians still debate, could London have become the world's greatest city without the plague and the fire? The answer, most historians believe, is no. Disaster forced London to become what prosperity alone never could. The plague pits are still there, beneath your feet. Discovered every time London digs for a new building. Pudding Lane still exists. Stand there today, and you stand exactly where the fire that rebuilt London began. What London teaches us is this: cities, like people, are not destroyed by disaster. They are defined by it. The plague took 100,000 lives. The fire destroyed 80% of the city. And yet, here it stands. London does not remember the plague and fire as defeat. It remembers them as the moment it truly became London. 360 years later, the city that was once a mass grave stands as the most visited city on Earth. Every modern city on Earth carries London's DNA: wide streets, fire codes, central banking, public health. 2,000 years ago, this was an uninhabited swamp. Today, 8 million people call it home. London survived Roman invasion, Viking raids, Norman conquest, plague, fire, and the Blitz. It always came back. In 1940, German bombs fell on London for 57 consecutive nights. St. Paul's Dome survived, untouched. The same dome that Wren built from the ashes of 1666 stood unbroken through Hitler's bombs in 1940. Every person who walks London streets today walks on top of history that most people never knew existed. Beneath every street, every building, every bridge, London is built on the bones of everything it survived. In 1665 and 1666, London faced the unimaginable, and in facing it, became truly, permanently magnificent. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe and tell us. What city should we explore next?